You celebrate our worship team real fast. Hey, look, I know that you guys have the lights and the whole thing. I am completely ADD. Okay, so just do me a favor, just for the teaching. You guys are going to be able to go ham here in a second. But just during the teaching, try not to use those things as a weapon for Satan, okay? Which is a way that you could be a distraction against what the Lord actually wants to do here. And I use those words, a weapon for Satan. It sounds kind of funny, but like Paul talks about people like that. So don't do that. Don't be a weapon for Satan. That's no fun. So yeah, just in this space, I know that you have them and all the rest of it, and shiny objects are like, ooh, squirrel. Don't do that. All right. Practicing the way of Jesus, we're talking about that. Hannah was talking about that idea of like the Spirit empowers us to do that. I'm so glad that she talks about that. Yes, this is not supposed to be a burden. It's supposed to be a blessing for us to practice the way of Jesus. It does require effort. There is effort in Christianity. There's not earning in Christianity, but there is effort. And so sometimes I feel like people are like, man, if the Lord wants me to do something, the Spirit will just empower me to do that, and I'll just wait until He does. You don't do that with food and feeling full. You didn't like, if the Lord wanted me to be full, the Spirit would fill me with food. No, you eat food, and you do that with water too. So we have a natural practice of pursuing things and doing things in order to experience the fullness that's here and now. And so in the same way, to practice the way of Jesus does require effort. Don't earn anything by it, but following Jesus does require effort. He talks about putting your hand to the plow. Anyone who puts her hand to the plow and turns back isn't worthy of me, is what he says. And so there is this idea of like, man, there's something inside the practice of following him that he's saying, like, there's blessing here. And to those who actually put it into practice, put my word into practice, they experience that thing. And so just so we know that as we're talking about some of these things. But this is John 2, verses 1 through 11. It's a story about Jesus at a wedding. This is what it says. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there. And Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." "Woman, why do you involve me?" Jesus replied, "My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." And nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. And Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Now, draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet." And they did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn it knew. Then he called to the bridegroom aside, and he said, "Everyone brings out the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests have had too much to drink. But you've saved the best till now." What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. This is the word of the Lord. I shared this on Sunday just a little bit, but I want to talk about practices again. A couple weeks ago, I was with my wife, and we had to walk through this marriage counseling practice thing where I had to write 25 things about her that I loved. And I love my wife. There's a season in time where it's like, I love you. We're committed to you. We've been together 10 years married and almost 11 now. But in doing the practice and like in actually doing the thing, like I love her already, but the practice was write down 25 things that you appreciate about her, that stir your affection for her, that make you love her. And so I just wrote down 25. They came pretty easily. I was sitting by myself, wrote down 25. And it was in this process of like actually doing the practice that I just, in the midst of it, like it did something in my heart and in my soul to remind me of like, oh yeah, she's awesome. And like, it's not like writing, it wasn't making stuff up, like as if I was like writing it and then when I wrote it, it came true in her life. Like this is stuff that just existed in her life. And so you can think like you already knew that about her. Certainly if you already know that about her, it should stir something in your heart. But that wasn't the case. It was when I actually walked through the practice that I experienced the richness. When I put in the effort of the practice is where I experienced the richness of what the practice was there for, in order to help me to once again have my affection stirred for her in a really wonderful way. And so in the same way, when Jesus says practice the way of Jesus, it does require effort. But there is this idea that he's like, look, it's just something that there's just riches and glory available to those who are willing to believe me that there's something there. Someone like, yes, the riches and glory are there, But there's something, if you'll just do the practice, you'll experience something that you wouldn't have experienced otherwise. If you choose not to do it, you're not going to experience it. But if you choose to press in and do the practice, you'll experience those things. That was my experience with doing that marriage counseling practice. And that is true of what Jesus is calling us to hear, especially with this one. When he says that we should practice putting his word into practice, we should practice being like him, that is especially true. We especially experience the riches of knowing Jesus when we practice this idea of party. When we practice party, when we practice celebration, you experience not just there's riches and glory available. When you do that, when you're at a party and you're experiencing it in Jesus' name, you experience really, really wonderful stuff that if you just didn't go, you wouldn't experience those things. And so I want us to talk about the practice of party and help us to understand why we need to do this. In my opinion, the church parties too little. We should party more. We should have more parties for random things and just throw down every week. It should be, Wednesday night should feel like that most of the time. There's a time to be solemn, but there's a time to rejoice, and I think the church parties too little. So we need to practice the practice of partying. Okay, the first reason why is because we remind ourselves, when we practice partying, we remind ourselves that Jesus is better than we think he is. When we party, we remind ourselves that, oh yeah, Jesus is better than we think he is. We don't need to miss the fact that this is Jesus' first sign and miracle. Like his first sign and miracle, the first one, like to inaugurate, to be like, what's he going to do to show that he is awesome in God? Like he doesn't heal the sick. He doesn't heal somebody who's paralyzed or anything like that. He doesn't cast out a demon and be like, I got power over darkness, son. Like that's not what he does. Like instead, what he does, he uses his first power to make sure the party could go another day. Like there's something about that, like we need to recognize that like the first time he like flexed his arm and was like, what can you do? Oh, I can make sure there's wine here so that this party doesn't end 2 days too soon, but I can actually make it go a little longer. We need to really, really understand that like he is giving a sign here for what he's about. And he's like, this is going to be the first place where he ultimately flexes his power. And so this is important because, again, I said this earlier, but I think our primary experience with God is that we don't view him this way. We see God as a joy killer, like someone who's actually robbing us of joy, something like that. We see him as someone who primarily, like, if he showed up to a party, I think the way we experience Jesus, like, if he showed up to a party, he'd probably take away all the alcohol, call your parents, and make you leave. Like, I think that's primarily how we think of him. And yet, like, what's presented here is that's not the case. We don't, but we don't see him that way. He's someone who shows up to the party and is like, oh, you guys are running out. Oh, I'll take care of that. Don't worry about that. And he takes care of that. Like, and this isn't primarily how we see him. He isn't someone who runs in and is like, you guys are having too much fun. Turn that music down. Get out. Like, he doesn't do that. He actually runs into this party. They're asking him for something. And he ultimately uses his power to allow the celebration to continue. He is filled with joy. He is filled with celebration. 150 gallons of wine is what he offered to this situation. 150 gallons of wine is what he brought in. He's not here to take away the abundance. He's here to ultimately give more than what we can possibly imagine. He's better than we think he is. Again, I think we primarily view Jesus as boring or a joy killer, and he's just not that way. That's not who he is. The religious people in his day, the Pharisees and all those other people, the Sadducees and teachers of the law and the scribes, like all those people thought he was the way that most of us think that he is. They thought that God would be like, if God shows up, he would be kind of boring, very solemn, and angry at everybody all the time. That's what they were expecting when God showed up, when like the Messiah came. They were expecting him to be very reserved, respectable. They did not expect somebody tossing in 150 gallons of wine. They didn't expect that. And so it makes sense that like when Jesus shows up and he's eating and drinking and he's going to parties, it's like, this can't be God. He's having too much fun. Like literally that's why they reject him, because he's going to too many parties. Like he can't be the God that we've been longing for. He can't be the God that we've been waiting for. He's not boring enough. He's not angry at all. He seems to really enjoy having a really good time. He seems to be having too much fun. This can't be him. This is why they reject him. Like, it's ironic. This is me growing up, and many of the students and people I talk to, the reason people reject God is because they think he's boring and a joy killer and all those different things. The reason they rejected God is because, the reason they rejected Jesus is because he was not boring, too much of a partier, and had too much fun. Do you see how it's the opposite? The religious people in his day were looking for God and looking for a boring one, and we're going, I don't want a God who's boring. Like, we literally have just crossed paths somewhere. We reject him because we think he's boring. They rejected him because he was having too much fun. Do you see how this is switched for us? Like, this isn't actually who he is. He didn't align with their way of thinking. They rejected God. They rejected Jesus as God, again, because he was having too much fun. And so, for us, as we consider who Jesus actually is, I think it's important to understand that, like, he came to throw a party. He came to invite people into that party. That's what he is about, and that's what you see here. He's filled with joy. Dallas Willard says this. It says, if we're ever going to properly know God, we must first understand that he's the happiest being in the universe. If we're ever going to actually know him properly, not just like a wrong view of him, but if we're going to know him properly, we must first understand that he's the happiest being in the universe. And when we party, when we celebrate, remind ourselves that partying was his idea. Partying was something that he showed up for too. Partying was something that he was joy-filled about. He's more joy-filled, he's more fun than we think. And so when we do that, we're reminded of those things. Second reason, we party, when we do that, we remind ourselves of what Jesus came to do. We remind ourselves of what Jesus came to do. In this story, Jesus transforms water into wine. He transforms basically something that's worthless and empty, emptiness. He transforms emptiness into abundance. And this is important for us to understand because the water has a lot of significance there. So if you think of Genesis 1, and it says the earth was formless and empty, and the waters covered the face of the deep. Waters and darkness covered the face of the deep. And then what did God do? He looks at the emptiness of the world that's covered by water and the formlessness of it, and he adds abundance to it. And he separates these things, and he adds things in there, and he does all this stuff. And he takes something that's empty and formless, and he forms it, but he transforms it into a space of abundance. And so what you see Jesus here is he's just doing the exact same thing. He has this water that's empty in terms of use, and the party's about to die, and he's like, I can transform emptiness into abundance. That's what he came to do. That's what he wants to do. And so where there was water, Jesus once again turns it into abundance. And if you notice what the man says in the passage, he says, the master of the banquet, he tasted the water that had been turned into wine, and then he called the bridegroom aside and said, you've saved the best till now. Like you didn't give the best earlier, like you've saved the best till now. And he didn't know, and the servants did, but he didn't know, and most of the people didn't know. Like, he didn't know that this is Jesus' wine. This is what Jesus had done. He didn't know that. But what everybody at that party understood, even though they didn't know that, everybody at that party understood that this is better than what we've had on our own. Like, everything that we've had just us, this is far better than anything we've experienced just us. All of them would have agreed. If they had known that Jesus had done this, they would all say, oh, Jesus' abundance is a lot better than ours. This tastes so much better than what we were able to accomplish on our own. And this is what he came to do. He came to look at our lives and go, you think you've experienced joy in your life? You think you've experienced some abundance because you got a girlfriend finally? Like, that just ain't it. Like, there's more to it. And he's going, if you think that you've experienced some real abundance or real joy in your time, and you're like, I've experienced that. He's like, you have no idea what's available to you. Like, nothing that you could do on your own. Like, well done. You did something that made your heart feel glad. Good for you. But, like, you have no idea how much more is available to you. I can take everything that's empty and bring joy and abundance and fullness into it. And so that's what when we party, when we celebrate and we see those things, we're reminded, like, this is actually what he came to do. And so if you're ever at a celebration or you ever are being celebrated where people are celebrating you and it's like, you feel like life has been given to you and like you finally can breathe and like I'm loved and I'm noticed and all this, like when you experience that, you realize for the first time maybe, it's like, hey, this is actually what you experience right here in the midst of this celebration that feels so good. All of this joy that you're filled with, everything of like this celebration, it's like this was so much fun. All of that, what you're reminded of is that is exactly what Jesus came to do. And so he walks into this party and he looks at something that's empty and he ultimately transforms it into abundance. And he's like, when you experience that at a celebration, you are literally experiencing what I came to bring into your life, into your heart in a full way. I want to do that completely. I don't want to just do it in one area, on one night, on a Saturday night. I don't want to just do it. Anytime you experience any kind of joy like that, he's like, that's a reminder of what I actually came to do. I I didn't come to steal and kill and destroy your world. I actually came to take the emptiness that you're searching to fill, and I came to fill it. I came to be the one to do that. He saved the best till now. And so what he's saying to us is like, I can transform that too. I can transform your emptiness into abundance as well. So Jesus is better than what we think, and he can take those things that ultimately we've been trying to fill, and he can actually fill those things. We're reminded every time we do that. We're reminded that that's what he's about. Okay, last thing. When we party, I believe we experience the heart of God. When we celebrate, I believe that we experience the heart of God. Again, the joy and all the rest of it, I think we experience those things. I wrote this down, and I'm going to read it just because I want us to understand this, and I want to kind of tell a narrative story from like the beginning of the Bible to like where we're at right now. But I wrote it down just so I'm going to read it to you because I want to read it slowly and I want it to make sense. But I do believe as we experience celebration, as we actually party together in the name of Jesus, I believe that we experience what God's heart has always been. Not this, like God changed when it turned into Jesus, and now it's just, not that. That's some heresy anyways, but like not that. But like this is actually what he's been about the entire time, and I want to show you that. So just bear with me as I read this, and you can read along too. Okay. We must see God as the great party planner. We must see God as the great party planner. In Genesis 1 and 2, we see him setting up the greatest party of all time. He gets everything ready, the environment, the food, the drinks. He even gets the people there, 2 of them, Adam and Eve, and tells them to make more people so that they can experience the joy of this celebration. But just as the celebration begins, just as the beat was about to drop, sin comes in like the noise police and shuts down the party, and he forces everyone to leave. This great party planner spends the rest of the Bible working on ways to finally get the party back up and going so that the people can rejoin the celebration. He sets up new party rules in a new venue called the temple. He knows more rules aren't the best way to liven up a party, but they're necessary to keep the peace, and he'll take what he can get. Yet, even with all of that, it doesn't work. At every turn, sin keeps getting in their way. It's inevitable. Every time the great party planner gets close to pumping up the volume, setting out the snacks, busting open the doors again, and inviting everyone in, sin kills the party. So, when Jesus shows up and parties so hard that people have a hard time believing that he's God, we see why. The great party planner has been waiting to bust a move for generations. And when he finally crushes sin on the cross, the great party planner doesn't just open the door, he tears that sucker down from top to bottom, completely down so that it will never be closed again. Sin is finally defeated, the party is back on and bumping, and all are invited to attend. From beginning to end, he's been trying to get everybody in the same room. Like, just get in here. There's glory here. There's joy here. In my presence is fullness of joy. Like, I just want you here. And sin has always been the noise police going like, oh, guys, we really don't, you got to get out of here. And you got to go, and you can't enjoy it. And finally, Jesus crushes sin on the cross, and he tears the curtain from top to bottom and is like, never again will I shut that door. Never again will they be cast out. Everybody's invited in, and everybody can enjoy the party. If we don't see him like that, and just read the Bible, like just all the way through. You get to the end of the Bible in Revelation, and what is there at the very end of the Bible? It's a gigantic wedding celebration. Jesus is back at a wedding, and there's new wine flowing, and he's provided it all because he was the one who sacrificed his life on the cross. And so you see this consistently. From beginning, there's a celebration. To the end, there's a celebration. In the midst of it, there's a celebration. Like God is constantly just going like, I don't know where the line was drawn, and you guys forgot who I was, but this is always who I've been. I'm a God who parties. I'm a God who wants to invite people into these things. And we primarily look at our lives and we look at the fun that we can have and go like, I can't invite God into my life because then I won't have fun. And it's like, do you not realize that fun began with him? And what you're doing is actually probably something that's not fun. It might feel fun, but it's destructive, like it's actually killing you. And give it enough time and it will wedge in there and it'll actually crush you. And he's like, I'm just inviting people in to this thing that I've been trying to allow them to experience the whole time. If we don't see him this way, we'll miss the heart of God and we'll miss him altogether. We'll reject him. And I think some of you maybe do this. Like you reject God for a certain reason, and you reject him because you think he's not fun, or you feel like you can't have fun with him. And the issue with is he's like, you're rejecting something, you're just not rejecting me. Like there are reasons to reject Jesus, but he's like, this just isn't one of them. Watch me at a party. Everybody wanted to be around this. Everybody wanted to see the party go on a little longer, and I was the one that allowed the party to go on a little longer because there's abundance in me that I long to give out. Eleazar Gonzalez says, the kingdom of heaven, this thing that Jesus came to bring us, the kingdom of heaven is a party with an open invitation. This is available to all of us. Anybody who can believe, who will actually believe and go like, okay, I've only ever heard that God or thought that God is this way. But according to the scripture, he seems to be completely different than that. Anybody that can make that switch and go like, maybe he's not everything that I thought he was. Maybe he's actually better than I think that he is. The people who can believe that actually experience who God really is. And then they get to enjoy this abundance that he came to give. And he says this, again, he's like, I came to give life and life in abundance. So that's who he is. When we party, I believe those are the things that we experience. I believe we realize it's like, oh man, maybe he's better than he thinks. Maybe he's better than I think that he is. I'm reminded of that. Maybe it's true that like maybe this is what he came to do. When I experience the joy of this is what he came to do. Maybe this is the actual heart of God. So how we practice partying. Some of you, maybe you know how to throw a party, but here's how we can practice it. The first is make a fun list. Make a fun list. This sounds fun. The same way that like I made a list like about my wife of like the things I love about her. Make a fun list. Write down a list of fun things that you love to do, and then just choose one per week and do that thing, but invite people into it. Like the way that the Lord is constantly inviting people into things, invite people into it. Make a fun list. It's cool. Take photos if you'd like. Make a fun list and then invite people into it. Just write it down. If you made 52 fun things that you like to do, you have one per week, and then invite somebody into it and go do that thing, man. That'd be fun. Invite me. I'd love to go if I'm available. Make a fun list. If you don't invite me, it's okay. Just don't tell me that you didn't invite me because I hate not being invited. Okay. Second thing is throw mini celebrations. I've said this before, but my son, anytime he does something good, he's this is his response real fast. I'm like, good job, man. He's like, yeah. Just a mini celebration, just a quick clap to be like, crushed it. Like he just this tiny little thing. But for him, it's this trigger of like, I did something good. Let's go. And like, just have some, my wife does like this thing where she goes to like the supermarket or something, and then all of a sudden she finds a parking spot like near the front. She and the Lord have an inside joke about that like, Lord, if you'll give me a spot at the front, like I'll know that like you see me and you're caring for me. It doesn't always happen. It doesn't mean that he doesn't see her. But when it happens, she's like, you see me, I got the parking spot. Even if there's an old lady that's trying to get in, she's like, nope, the Lord saw me first, okay. Not that. But just these mini celebrations, like when something happens, just have a response. We do this naturally. Your team wins or something good happens and you're high-fiving. I mean, there's just something that we naturally do. There's a celebration. Throw a mini celebration. Do these often. Do it to where people think you're weird for like, why'd you celebrate that? It's like, oh, because I'm a follower of Jesus and I'm supposed to mini celebrate my life. Like, do that thing, whatever it is. I said this on Sunday, but I really do want to be the loudest table in any restaurant. I want people to come up to me and say like, hey, I'm sorry, sir. Could you keep it down? And we're like, oh, yeah, so sorry. Like, what are you guys celebrating? Like, is it a birthday that you're celebrating? Like, why are y'all being so loud? It's like, no. All of our sins are forgiven. And so we need more food, more desserts, more chocolate pie. Please. Okay. That's what did it. That's what got you there, chocolate pie. All right. Throw mini celebrations. Third, find a reason to celebrate at any gathering. Find a reason. If you're gathered together and you can all of a sudden something good happens and you throw your hands together and you just start clapping. Thank you. Find a reason to celebrate at any gathering. We did this with a birthday activity. We find these random reasons like, what can we celebrate? What can we be overjoyed about? And the reason is when we experience it, we genuinely believe. Like when we genuinely experience some of that joy, we actually believe that like, oh, I'm going to experience some of the goodness of God in my time. I'm going to experience what He came to. He wants me to experience joy. Stay with me. I know it's a rich time. The teaching is so gold. All right. He wants you to experience that joy. And so we look for these spaces where we can celebrate. We're going to celebrate Emma not celebrate her going away, but her time here in a couple of minutes. We're going to go to Sean's and we're going to do that. We have our own food and our own dessert and our own stuff. And it's like we're finding the reason to celebrate at every given moment because when we experience that joy, we're experiencing the heart of the Father. So find reasons to celebrate. If there's somebody in your life and they're sitting there and they're kind of down, throw them a random party. Like you're down on Thursday. You're sad, and this is your not sad party. And throw them a party. Invite them over and have everything for them. And then fourth, redemptive calendar. God primarily, from beginning to end, Genesis to Revelation, God primarily, whenever he worked among the people, he primarily would tell them, like, hey, I want you to remember what I did for you. And they're like, okay, how do I remember what we did, what you did for me? How do I remember that? He's like, I want you to have a celebration. I want you to hold a festival, or I want you to throw a party. Like, here's how I want you to remember. I want you to do those things. And so you see this all throughout the Old Testament. You see them throwing parties and celebrations, these long things where they're like, don't do any work. Like, don't go to school. Don't send your kids. Like, don't do anything. Like, just celebrate what I did. Remember it through a party. And so in the same way, you need to, when God breaks into your life and does something and changes something or transforms something or heals somebody or does something, mark it on your calendar and be like, this is a day that I'm going to remember, and I'm going to remember it with a celebration. I'm going to remember it with a party. And every time that day rolls around, all of a sudden it happens and you're throwing a party, you're throwing or just throwing stuff to the ground in the back. You're just so excited that you're throwing things down. Like maybe that's what you're doing. I'm just throwing a party because I'm so excited because God did this thing. Everybody will be like, is it somebody's birthday? Why are you having this party? It's not Flag Day. It's not Christmas. Like what's happening? What are you doing? It's like, oh, this is the day that God healed so-and-so. And so I just want to remember it. I want to remember it with the celebration. And so my encouragement to you guys is to put those back on the screen. What are y'all doing back there? A mini celebration. All right. Look, I've lost track of this thing. So, no, I know where I'm at. Thank you. But I appreciate that, Joshua. It's hard. It is hard a little bit because I'm like, more than anything in my life, like this is why I didn't follow Jesus until I was 17. Like my primary experience with Christians, and if you would call yourself a Jesus follower, my primary experience with you guys was that you were boring, lifeless, guilt-ridden, unfun, completely like it was just every Christian. Stay with me. I mean, I'm not joking. I'm being serious. My primary experience with Christians in my school, with people who call themselves Jesus followers, was a life lived that made everybody else go like, man, you say you got good news. Like you would testify to the fact that the most important thing in your life is this Jesus character, and your life looks miserable, it sounds miserable, you don't seem to like it yourself. Why would anybody want what you have? Life's hard enough. Why would I ever want what you have? That's what was the primary experience. And so, when I finally read the Bible for myself and realized that Jesus was at a party and it was about to end, and he didn't let it end, but he used his power first to flex and go, no, I want to use my first power in order to keep a celebration going. And the reason he did that is because he's like, this is my heart, this is who I am. I want people to experience the goodness of my Father and the goodness of who I am. And I want them to relate having joy at this party to having joy with me, that these things are the same. When I read that, I was like, all those Christians at my school were doing it all wrong. Like you're killing yourself over something like you don't even know the God you claim to believe in. You don't even understand that he's a God who is a party animal, and because we're Jesus followers, we are as well, as Tony Campolo says. Like this is who he is, and from beginning to end, to read the scriptures and go, he's constantly throwing celebrations over and over and over again. And I was constantly looking for joy in all these other different things, and only to find out that like it actually lives in him. So yes, for me, it is like, this is maybe one of the most important things I could possibly teach, because when Christians get this right, they present to the world a God who actually is joy-filled and loving and can give them what they've always been longing for but never able to find. And so as followers of Jesus, if you actually claim to be one and you're not just by name only, which many of them are, if you're actually a follower of Jesus and your experience isn't joy-filled and your experience, now I'm not saying that you won't walk through suffering, everybody does that. But if your primary experience isn't one where you're like, no, he actually does lead people into abundance, my encouragement to you is to just consider, I think you're doing it wrong. I think he's better than what you think that he is. And so, yes, make a fun list. Do these things. When people ask you, why are you doing this? Why'd you make 52 things that are fun? Because I'm a Jesus follower. And I'm supposed to, when I experience fun and joy, I experience the heart of God. Throw many celebrations. Find a reason to celebrate somebody in your life. And then have a redemptive calendar. Mark the areas where he's broken into your life. Do that. I want our ministry to be about that. This is why we mark these things at United when we do a celebration at the end of the trip, just to mark, like, God, you were faithful. And so let's mark this out. Let's throw a party. And that's why we're going to do it today. We're going to throw a party. So let me pray, and then I'll talk to you. Father, I do love this about you. I love that you, from beginning to end, you were constantly celebrating at the beginning of the Bible. You're celebrating through the middle of it, and you're celebrating at the end. God, I pray that we would follow you in this way, that we experience your heart. That those of us in this room who struggle to believe that you actually are like this, God, I pray that you'd give them faith to see it. Just give them eyes to read your Bible so that they can see this is who you actually are. Father, would you help us to experience your heart even tonight as we celebrate, as we eat and drink and enjoy. God, I pray that we would be reminded this is what you came to do. This is what you're about. And this is what you long for us to experience in your name. Amen. All right, we're going to sing.